So I'm here today with one of my favorite synths, the dreadbox NYMPHES. It's a 6-voice polyphonic synthesizer with 1 voltage controlled oscillator per voice, 2 LFOs, 1 is global for pitch, and then the second LFO can be assigned to any of the destinations within the synthesizer for some pretty kind of nuts modulation considering how small it is. It's got a mono output. It has an onboard reverb, which sounds decent, but again, it's mono, so it's kind of limiting. I tend to use outboard boxes, or I say outboard boxes. I've got a Grand Canyon stomp box on here, and I think it sounds pretty cool. You can definitely hear the difference of it off. First on. Truly makes this synth stereo and where it really shines. So I actually just wanted to talk about what I like that the synth does, how I use it in my workflow, how I've used it to inspire some songs that I've written, and just show you some patches I've made over the last few years, learning the ins and outs of the synth. I will admit when I first got it, I was pretty intimidated about how you see about, I don't know how many, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 or 15 sliders on the front with a shift function. So you really get 30 parameters that you can work on in the main part of the synthesizer. But then you have this whole menu with the rotary encoder that gives you mode, play mode. You have poly, unison A, which is 6-voice unison. Unison B is 4-voice unison. You have triphonic. You can have triphonic, which is 2 voices or 2 oscillators per voice for three notes at a time. And then you have duophonic, which no, I got that wrong. Sorry, it's two oscillators per voice. Triphonic, start up. Triphonic is 2 VCOs per voice for 3 notes at a time because you split the 6 voices. Duophonic is 3 voices per note because you split the synth again, but you do it in a multiple of 3 so that you can play 2 notes at once. So why don't we get right into it and load up a patch? We'll get to the scary rotary knob encoder right away, because the rotary knob is probably the most intimidating thing on the synth. You'll spend an hour getting the perfect sound, and you go to save your patch. You accidentally move the knob at the wrong time. Patch is gone. Or if you load something up while, say, the save knob is blinking, and you're like, ooh, let me do this and that. Ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah, I'm liking that. You get your stank face going, and then you're like, ooh, cool, let me go save it. It actually never loaded. So once you go to save it, you actually load the patch you were overwriting, and all of your changes are gone. So go slow when you're learning this synth. The synth you can move very fast with once you get it, but I suggest everybody when you first get it, move slowly. But anyway, bank A, I want my patches. Okay, I'm going through. What happens if I want to go to bank B? Well, while load is blinking, I hit shift, and now when I cycle the rotary encoder, I'm actually cycling through different patch banks. So for the purpose of finding my INIT patch, where I purposely saved it on C5 or 6, I first want to go to bank C, and then when I'm where I want to be in what bank, I deselect shift, and now I can cycle through that bank. And I want to go to 7, I believe. Yep, C7 is my INIT patch. And then to load it, I'll show you exactly what I was just talking about. So we're on the INIT patch. Sounds great, right? Ooh, nice. I want to go an octave down. Ooh, I want to bring that cutoff filter a little bit lower. Ooh, get a little resonance in. Maybe get some... Oh, yeah, get that... Get that stanky bass going. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Do a little waveform action, a little sub. And you're like, yo. And you're liking that, and you're like, ooh. I want to vibe to that. I want to save that patch, right? Okay, save. And you're like, ooh, let me play that. Oh, it's gone. Oops. So make sure that you always load your patches before you start to tweak your patches, or else you'll go insane. The cool thing about that, it's a what you see is what you get type synth. If you notice where all my sliders are right now, I just kind of wiggle them in the space that they were in. Ooh, looks like we're getting that sound back, that funky stank face bass. Ooh, whoa, there it is. Okay, cool. So if you do mess up, step back and breathe. And then figure, oh, okay, well, I accidentally loaded an init patch, and without loading it, or I selected my init patch, didn't load it all the way, made something I liked, and erased it and trying to save it, just chill, because everything that you see on the front panel is still there. You just have to tweak your sliders where they already existed, and then your patch is back to life. So anyway, I just want to actually initialize my patch, kill all these down, do that again, we'll get back there. Okay, so let's actually walk through some things on the synth. So here, the way that my initialized patch works is my wave was on sawtooth. We have saw, square, and triangle wave on this synth, and it's a variable slider. You can hear it. So I init on sawtooth. My wave level is all the way up. I don't have any sub on the sawtooth init patch, but this is what it sounds like. And if you just want to hear the sub, it's a square wave. Love using that for some heavy basses or 8-bit stuff. Whew. All right, so we're back here. You got noise. You got your pitch LFO. So pitch is where LFO 1 works on pitch only. Or if you go into shift, it's the level of LFO. So that's how LFO 1 works. It's basically just a pitch, give you a little bit of warble and harmonic chillness. It'd be cooler if it was a binaural synth and you could do it, you know, channel to channel. You can't, but it still sounds really good. I basically use that pitch shift on every single patch I make. One thing that I actually really love about the NYMPHES over something like the Rev 2 or the OB6 is that you can put a delay on when the LFO actually comes in. So you can have kind of a crazy LFO, like let's say, pretty exaggerated and gross, right? But if you hit your shift knob, that becomes LFO 1 delay parameter, and when it's all the way down, your LFO kicks in right away. But listen here, when you slide that up, it takes time to actually cycle into the sound. So what I love that, because you just... Anyway, I think it's a really cool tool, and the Prophet Rev 2 and Sequential OB6 don't have that, and actually kind of drives me crazy. Considering too the price difference, where you can get this new for under $500 and used for about $300, and the Rev 2 you're in the $1,500 to $2,000 range, and the OB6 the $2,000 to $2,500 range, and to have no delay on your LFO option just kind of blows my mind. Back to it. So we get your cutoff. Let's actually kill this LFO for you guys. So frequency cutoff. Again, still just with the saw wave, and that's it. Nothing else, just frequency. And then resonance. Nice. Envelope generation. I love to make patches that are a little bit stabby. And then similar to a Prophet, the envelopes on this synth are really clicky. One thing that the NYMPHES does real well is sound like a Prophet. It also has a Juno flavor. With that, it has a very fast envelope. So you get clicky envelopes, like, hear that click? And it can be kind of cool, but right now I don't want it. Who does, really, right? I never really kind of ever. You can hear that click? All right, so to get rid of the click, right, just now I was in the filter envelope, but I'm actually going to go to the amp envelope and just barely push up the amp attack. Oop, a little more, I guess. See, it sucks, and then you still kind of have, it's kind of gross. So let's see what we can do about getting rid of that click. I'm going to increase the release of the filter envelope. Still there. I'm going to increase the decay of the filter envelope. It's still there. I'm going to come up a little bit on the sustain, and then I guess a little on the attack. Honestly, I actually don't think I can ever get rid of it. I'm going to hit shift again and push up the decay on the amp envelope so that we should hear, once I push up my wave, our init patch again, and we do. Okay, so let's start here. Let's just make something kind of cool and kind of stabby. And to do that, normally I would take the cutoff and I just bring it down to about halfway. I'd bring the envelope generator up to about halfway. I would look at my filter envelope, and you'll notice how I just moved down my decay knob because that was the setting on the amp envelope side, hitting shift. So if I want to work on the filter cutoff, sorry, if I want to work on the filter envelope, I actually do it without the shift knob on. I promise you'll learn how to do this, but it kind of does suck when you first start out, but it's pretty second nature to me right now. But I do always want to mention, go slow, read the manual, have patience. But if I increase the envelope generation and then turn down the actual filter cutoff and then mess around with the envelope curve of the filter, you can hear how only click, right? But as I start to turn up the decay, it starts to let some of that filter come through on the decay. You get a really nice crisp attack. And then, ooh, loving that. And then I'm going to bring up the release on the filter cutoff a little bit, which you really only will hear once you go into shift. Now notice the settings that I have here, my ADSR, are currently for my filter. So right now when shift is off, those are my filter settings. When I hit shift, decay is actually all the way up on my envelope now, but it's not showing here because now I'm in the sub menu. See? And release in the amp is actually not on at all, even though it's showing almost 80% on the filter cutoff. So I'm just going to nudge that because it's in the zone I want, in which with shift it should give me the sustain or the extended release that I was looking for. Woo, baby, man, I wish that was stereo, but it's not, but it can be. Get yourself a Grand Canyon, you'll be set. They're like 150 bucks. They sound freaking sweet. All right, anyway, back to what we were doing. So I'm going to deselect my shift knob because now I want to go out to the main panel. Because in the main panel, I want to be messing around with my cutoff frequency, my resonance, and my envelope generation. If I had shift on and I started messing with those same sliders, I'd actually be on the sub-menu for high pass filter, tracking of filter, and then the LFO like dub warble. But we're not trying to go for Skrillex right now. We actually just want something to be a little bit warm. So I'm going to take my cutoff frequency. I'm going to bring it all the way down. And see with it even, oh, sorry, I'll shut off the delay. Even with the cutoff all the way down, the reason why that's passing signal is because I have the decay and the release of the filter envelope up, and I have the envelope generation at about 80%, meaning that I'm pushing the filter. Means I'm playing the curve that I've put on the cutoff, and I don't actually need any cutoff to be turned up. Took me a while to understand that with subtractive synthesis, and now that I know it, it's pretty much what I use for every patch I've ever created. But add a little resonance, and you got kind of that OB6 thing going. Feel free to tell me that I'm wrong. And then to get a little bit more out of that, I'm going to go back to my shift function for my amp envelope, and I'm actually going to put up the sustain, and then I'm going to come back to my filter envelope, and I'm going to raise the sustain, and then I just actually tweak the release a little bit so it hangs a bit longer. I don't hate that. Let's get a little bit of warble on the LFO. We'll bring in LFO 1, which is the global LFO. It affects all the voices the same, and it's mostly with pitch. Let's see if I put too much on. Ooh, kind of sounds like a dead old record. Oh man, I do love that. I also love the way that the NYMPHES allows you to make a patch that when you just kiss it, it'll sustain, but then when you hold it, it'll follow that curve of the filter envelope and just go dead. Oof, oh my God. It's like a secret weapon of this synth. I really like it. Okay, so right now we don't have any subwave. We'll bring some in. Okay, and then if you want to hear what pulse width sounds like on this, we can actually go up to a square wave, and now we have our main wave and our subwave are both a square shape, but I don't have any pulse width modulation yet, but that's what that sounds like. It sounds kind of boxy, like a square. And then if we want pulse width modulation, we go into our shift sub menu, and then our wave slider actually becomes our pulse width. Our pulse width slider. Okay, and you'll see that at 0, no pulse width, and you can hear it cycle in. Pulse width modulation on the auto right here. What I like to do is set the pulse width modulation actually with LFO2. So I hit my menu, and then I come over to my rotary knob, and I see in my menu here, LFO2 is number 2. So I go rotary knob to number 2. Now, to throw some gasoline on the fire, we are in. So, okay, when you're programming a sound, you have the main page, which is all of these titles down here. These are non-shift functions, and then our shift functions are along the top, sharing the same sliders. Now, you can see where all my sliders are. That's sharing layer 1 and layer 2, or I shouldn't say layers. It's basically shift and non-shift functions of normal sound design. Just one LFO, one global LFO sound design, nothing special. When we go into our LFO2, where like the magic happens, where the LFO2 is syncable, and you can really get some awesome sounds on something like the Arturia Keystep Pro, throwing a clock into it. But when you go to your LFO2, now every time you move one of these sliders, you're assigning it to the LFO2 rate. So to do pulse width modulation using LFO2, when you're in LFO2 using menu, you hit shift and it matches. That's actually the one cool thing. Shift and non-shift in LFO2 matches the same convention. So non-shift functions in LFO2 is everything along the bottom, titles along the bottom. Shift functions in LFO2 are titles along the top. So we're going to go to the pulse width modulation, and we're going to go from LFO2 pulse width modulation. We're going to listen to jacking it up and seeing what that sounds like. So this is all the way up, and then we go to our rate, and here's a kicker. If I were to adjust my rate right now, I'd be in the shift version of rate, which is delay of LFO2. So I'm going to shut my shift off, and now I'm actually in rate of LFO2. Hear that? Pulse width modulation is a really great way to fake a second oscillator on this synth. I also like to do just the waveform itself. So similar to kind of like a Juno-106 or an HS60, this doesn't allow you to do sawtooth and square together, which you can on a Juno. What this allows you to do is you can set the wave slider in between saw and square, and then the LFO2 will modulate that wave shape, and then you also have pulse width on that. This is what that sounds like. '80s calling, hello, what up? Okay, anyway, so I'm really happy with that. I actually don't want to get too freaky on anything, because you can get freaky. You can get freaky with the cutoff, and you can get freaky with the resonance, and you can get freaky with sub-menu functions of the LFO, and then with the high-pass filter. I don't know, it's just, you can just kind of break it. But anyway, we're going to go with this. It's a great sound. And if I have this set up right, actually that should clock to the tempo I have on here. So let's put it up to like 240. Okay, it isn't. So I have to set the LFOs to do that, but we're not going to worry about that right now. We're just going to love this. Man, the other thing about this synth is I always get lost, like I'm blamming on and I'm just getting lost and doing, and oh my God, I can't even talk. But anyway, so here we go. So if I want to do a little bit more tweaking now that I have that kind of background modulation, I'm hearing that I actually might want a little bit more cutoff to just have some sparkle on top. Shit. Dude, that might be a little too much sparkle. Let's bring that back. Maybe bring up some res. Okay, and then if you decide you're like, okay, cool, I like what's happening, but there's too much volume in what's going on with the modulation on level 2, the amount that you put the slider up is not only the spread that you get out of LFO2, like how much it will sweep that variable, that I guess variable, or you would say that parameter, but it's also the volume that it sweeps that parameter. So if I remember, which I don't really, what we just did, I think I want that there, but I think I'm going to bring the pulse width volume down. Okay, so what we're hearing right now is just the LFO2 modulating between the saw and the square wave. So I'm going to bring in a little bit of the shift function LFO2 for pulse width, but not crank it like I did before. This is with none. And then this is turning off the wave modulation on LFO2. I think I accidentally set some weird ass setting when I was kind of over exaggerating everything. Shoot, hang on, let me find it. So this is kind of something you got to get used to, is just you're in the LFO2, you've completely wiped out your shift and non-shift functions for your other sound design because now you're in here, but I'm just sweeping these parameters because I'm trying to find what is hung up in LFO2. So I'm actually going to shut off everything that I know that I set in LFO2. And that sounds like we're back to our normal clean. Yep, that's our normal clean wave. I'm going to go right back out to the, I'm going to go back to LFO and set up the pulse width in 1 second, but I just actually want to fix the main wave. There's too much sustain on that. That's not enough. I'm in shift, I'm on the amp side. And now I'm non-shift, I'm back on the filter side. And what I'm going to do is take down the resonance on the filter, the release. So much better. Now it's attacking and it's decaying mostly, and there's not so much hang on from that sustain that made it muddy and wishy-washy in the bottom and kind of lost definition in the patch. And now I'm going to go hit up menu, back to LFO2, and I'm going to bring up just halfway between saw and square to mimic my Juno patch creation, and then I'm going to kind of crank the pulse width modulation, and let's see what we get. Yep. It sounds freaking sweet, and you know what? I'm gonna call that a patch, and then I'm gonna hit up a little bit of Grand Canyon and show you how this thing really comes to life. Dude, that's the stank bass I've been talking about, and obviously you can tap tempo the Grand Canyon, which I really like. Anyway, that's about it. Just in closing, I want to say that the synth is a lot of fun, and until I got a Grand Canyon or even just a Boss CE5 chorus with stereo, I didn't really love this synth, but I fell in love with it after I had some effects, because it allows you to stereo spread what already sounds really good, and should have from the factory, I think, come with a stereo output at the very least. I mean, it has a really nice sounding onboard reverb, but because it's mono right up the middle, it's hard to use and hard to hear, so I often don't do it. But anyway, let me know what you thought. I'm going to do some more videos like this. So bye. Bye. We're going to go out on, let's go out on another patch before my camera dies.